Act with the end in mind, but make sure you know what the end really is. And that sometimes includes or requires using your imagination. Sometimes I will see a person act with the end in mind, but they haven't really figured out what the end is. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. You might see a person who you know, maybe they're your friend, maybe they're your family member, and you see them lying or manipulating to get what they want. So let's say that they are lying or manipulating to get into a relationship. Their end goal is to get this person to be committed to them. But the problem with their tactics is they're not thinking beyond the initial commitment. They're not thinking that if they really want to have a relationship with this person, the reality is, the likelihood is, the probability is that the lies and the manipulation will come out eventually. It might take 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, but the likelihood is the lies and the manipulation are going to come out. So it kind of reminds me of a story that I heard. And I might have read it. So I read a story about a builder who always built his houses to perfection. But on the last house before he retired, he cut corners on everything. He was just looking at the finish line. He's about to retire. And the day he reported for his last check, he was surprised to see the owner waiting for him. He got nervous for a moment, and then he relaxed, thinking that the man didn't know enough about building to detect any problems if he went and inspected the house himself. So his boss handed him his last check, and he handed him, surprise, a set of keys to the house that this contractor, this builder, had just built. That house was to be the reward for all of his hard work, for all of those years of service. And the builder, instead of being excited and overwhelmed with joy, he was devastated because he realized he was going to have to live inside of that house that he had built, where he had cut every single corner that he could cut. And so he was going to end up inheriting all kinds of problems for the whole time that he was in that house. So going back to where I started, when people build a relationship in the same way that that builder built a house, they're thinking about what they see as the end goal, getting that title, getting that house finished. But they're not realizing that they've got to live in the house that they built, that they have to live in that relationship that they built, and they're not going to be able to live up to those lies, those manipulations. It's actually built their entire relationship on a very shaky foundation, and they're going to have to deal with the consequences of that, the ramifications of that, the entire relationship. So it doesn't make any sense to not do it right, to not come into a relationship building it on a solid foundation, building it on trust and authenticity and honesty and effective communication and respect and vulnerability and transparency and all the other things that you could think of that would create a great relationship. Because cutting corners does not lead to a house or a relationship that you really want to live in. And, you know, I was on a guy's page not too long ago, and he kept posting all of these, what I felt were very cliche statements. And so, I'm going through my feed and he keeps popping up. He keeps popping up with all these things. And, I commented on 2 or 3 of them. And he said, I don't think you're in the right place because marriage is the end goal on my page. And I said, marriage shouldn't be the end goal for anybody's page, for anybody's life. Marriage, a lot of times, if you're just looking at the wedding, you're not really thinking about the relationship. You're not thinking about the bond. What does actually marriage mean? Does it mean that you get in front of a priest or a pastor and say your vows? Or are you talking about the actual setup and structure and the bond between the two people? Because a lot of times when people think about marriage and marriage being the end goal, they mean putting a ring on the finger. Some guys do. They mean getting her to say, I do. They mean walking down the aisle and they're done. They feel that they've gotten the prize. They did everything to get the prize of getting married. But what happens after the wedding? What happens later on when there's an actual relationship to have? So I think that we have to think about the real end goal, and a healthy relationship might be a better end goal than just marriage. And that's, my 2 cents, because I just want people to really think about what they're building, because I don't think everybody does. And I think some people just cut corners because they think they see the end goal in sight and they want to get to it as fast as possible. And they're not thinking about the ramifications of cutting those corners. May you walk in synergy. Act with the end in mind, but make sure you know what the end really is. And that sometimes includes or requires using your imagination. Sometimes I will see